Welcome to this edition of Google Author Talks with Chris Cheng. I am Jon Stokes, and normally if I'm at Google HQ, I am sitting out there in the audience live blogging about a Nexus phone or trying to think of good questions to ask, but this time I get to be on stage. If you know me, you probably know me as one of the founders of Ars Technica, and I've also in the past done some work for Wired and a couple of other tech publications. And now, weirdly enough, I'm kind of a gun guy, like Chris. And we'll talk a little bit about the how I made that transition and how he made it. Chris, some of you probably know him. He is a former Googler, a member of the Google Apps for Enterprise team. And while he was on that team, he entered and won History Channel's Top Shot Season 4 championship. And if you're not familiar with Top Shot, we're going to show a clip, I believe.
Yep.
Okay,
yeah,
we're going to show a clip. It's a reality show elimination type of competition where the participants compete and they shoot lots of different kinds of projectiles at lots of different kinds of targets. And so Chris has shot everything from grenade launchers to spear chuckers to so on and so forth. And he competed against some pretty serious marksmen, and he went on as an amateur and won. And it's a pretty cool story of how he did that. And now he is sponsored by Bass Pro Shops. He's a professional marksman, and he is also an NRA commentator. And he has a new book, Shoot to Win. And so we're going to be talking about some things from the book. I got a chance to read it, and it's a great introduction to firearms and to firearm culture. And also, interestingly enough, to the kinds of techniques that allowed Chris to go on to Top Shot and beat the pants off of people who were very, very experienced marksmen. So we're just going to do like a really informal, QA style interview format, and I'm just going to be bouncing questions off of Chris here.
And there'll be opportunities for audience participation. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to. We'll have opportunities for Q&A.
Yeah,
from the audience.
So Chris, one of the themes in the book that really is super predominant is the sort of power of the internet to teach you anything you want to know now, especially YouTube and forums and things like this. And it's sort of like I think of it as the rise of the autodidact, the rise of the self-taught person as an expert. And so not only can you teach yourself anything on YouTube now, I taught myself how to barbecue by watching YouTube videos, and my daughter thinks I'm a master pizza chef, and I watched a bunch of YouTube. But you can do it to a very high degree of competency. You can train yourself to a high degree of competency, like in the privacy of your own apartment or whatever, just on the internet. And historically, gun culture, that's not how it works. Knowledge about guns, about firearms, safety, maintenance, when to shoot, how to shoot, why to shoot. This is something that's passed on typically from father to son because it's very male dominated, although that's changing rapidly. Mm-hmm. But it's passed on, it's a relational kind of knowledge, it's steeped in tradition and in heritage. And so you kind of parachuted in off the internet. You're like this internet-powered YouTube, self-taught, goal-oriented, project-oriented person, and you're like, here is a project, I'm going to tackle it, I'm going to optimize this and that, I'm going to train myself, and you just sort of show up, in this competition with these people who are kind of heritage type of people, and then you beat them. And there's got to be some kind of backlash or culture clash there. And I was wondering if you could speak to that difference.
Yeah, I think at a very high level, it was really interesting to approach a subject that I didn't know a lot about, which was marksmanship. And I learned how to shoot when I was 6, and my father taught me how to shoot. But growing up in Southern California, it was an activity that we did all the time. There just wasn't a very strong or active gun culture. And it's just amazing to see how much information is on the web and the huge role that Google has played in providing people with a platform and giving people a voice too, to say what they want to say, teach other people, and it's all about sharing knowledge and learning. And I'm a student, a lifelong student of the philosophy that we are lifelong learners, and that you're never too old to learn something new. And there's certain types of people who either get really excited about the unknown and they just dive in and learn as much as they can, and there's other people who get intimidated by the things that they don't know, the fact that they may not be as good or they may not be good at all at a certain activity, and I just have always wanted to learn as much as I can and get as good as I can at that thing as quickly as possible. And so YouTube and the web was a primary way for me to learn about marksmanship. I didn't have a lot of friends or colleagues here at Google that shot guns, and so I didn't have a lot of that sort of in-person interaction and knowledge transfer from other people, like face-to-face. I mean, I did have that to a certain extent, but the web was a huge, important resource for me to learn about marksmanship and train for Top Shot.
Could you talk a little bit about some of the specific resources that you used? Were there any YouTube channels that you can just throw out there real quick for reference for go back and look?
Well, gosh, I mean, I was just like scouring. It's just one of those exercises where I didn't even know what I didn't know.
Right.
So I was just like seeing it all, like everything from beginning marksmanship to the advanced stuff. Semi-auto pistols, fully automatic, fully automatic rifles, and trying to then parse through all of this data and try and figure out, okay, how do I whittle down this massive body of knowledge and pare it down to the core essentials of what will help me win Top Shot? And so I don't remember like specific sites just because I was so overwhelmed with I was watching like FPS Russia. If you're familiar with FPS Russia, he's a YouTube personality. I think he's got like, I don't know, the bajillion, followers, and he just like blows stuff up. And so that's just a lot of, it's fun. Not so much educational, but just more, entertainment and a good time. But, there's a lot of discussion forums and a lot of, journalists who also write about firearms technique and tactics, and it was just fascinating, right? That whatever topic that we want to learn about, there are all these micro communities online that we can dive in and learn as much or as little as we want.
Yeah, I don't think growing up I would have ever thought that the skill set of here's a giant mass of relatively unstructured information. How do I sort it by usefulness, and how do I learn to process it and weed out what's irrelevant? I would never lump that in as like one of the marksmanship fundamentals. You know what I'm saying? This is not the kind of thing that you think of as I want to learn to shoot, or I want to learn to cook, or whatever it is that you're doing. But it's fascinating that skill set's now like a component, especially if you're going to go this route. And that's actually what I did a lot as a journalist for Ars Technica and for Wired was, you go out and you look and you process information, and you try to figure out what's relevant and what's not, and throw out the irrelevant stuff. And I think that's that kind of skill set is it has to be democratized. The more people that can do it, the more people can teach themselves.
Yeah, something that I always continually think about my time here at Google and just the skill sets that I gained from my experience working in customer support and technical support. And I mean, all of us here, I know your inboxes just get flooded, right, with hundreds of emails a day, and not just, your inbox, but Buganizer, and you've got all sorts of other, internal tools. You've got all these signals coming at you. And applying that skill set of, right, how do you filter out the low priority noise and prioritize, okay, what are the things that I need to do either right now, or from your team perspective, what are the most important things that our team should be focusing on to build the product, product enhancements, et cetera, and we're all busy people, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, and I think that's just a good general skill set to apply to all parts of your life, and that's a big part of what I talk about in the book. The book is, Shoot to Win is not just a book about beginning marksmanship. It's about how I took work skills that I learned here at Google, and I'm a musician, and I played a lot of baseball when I was a kid, and so taking these other skill sets and taking the frameworks and applying it to other parts in my life is a way that I'm able to bring my full skill set to a task at hand. So I'm not, like, if I'm at work, I'm not just thinking about my work skills, or if I'm working on a personal project, I'm pulling from work skills oftentimes. So, I really want to encourage a multidisciplinary kind of cross-platform approach, if you will, to optimizing your own life.
So let's go back to this skill thing in a minute. I want to kind of hop around and ask you about gun culture 1.0 and 2.0. And I don't know how many of you guys sort of follow this discussion, but there's kind of there's sort of gun culture 1.0, which is hunting, and the gun should have a wooden stock, and it should be like a single shot maybe, and it's about sort of outdoors centric, and it's more about, there's not really a competition focus. And then there's gun culture 2.0, which is people that come into guns from Call of Duty or from the movies or something like this, and the clothing is more tactical, and it's got that more competition vibe. And so there's historically been a bit of a clash between the two kind of camps, and that's narrowed quite a bit in the past 5 years or so. But Chris is very much sort of a more gun 2.0 kind of guy. I was raised as a gun 1.0 kind of guy, and I was pretty hostile to the 2.0 guys with the black rifles. I would go into a gun store and I would see these on the wall, and I would think, what freak buys that? Because surely you must have some kind of weird James Bond fantasy. And then eventually I got one. I was like, this is a lot of fun to shoot. And my nerd gear tech side kicked in, and I was like, this is a gadget. So I made that transition myself. And it's funny, most of my community, I grew up in Louisiana, in South Louisiana, and very sporting centric, hunting and camping and stuff. And one Christmas I went back, and all of a sudden the guys were pulling AR-15s out of the gun safe and showing them to each other, and that was kind of a shock for me. So that's happened kind of rapidly. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. I mean, have you seen this dichotomy or kind of lived on either side of it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion that we have about the 1.0 versus 2.0 folks. And for me, I mean, I've been hunting a lot. I'm also a competition shooter. But then I also enjoy trap shooting, which trap shooting is sort of more in that 1.0 kind of old school, break action shotgun. It's very meditative, and it requires your whole focus to literally just do one thing at a given moment in time. And in the multitasking kind of world that we live in, being able to just be disciplined and focused on a single task that's literally like right in front of your face is another skill set that I enjoy. And so I have my feet planted in both the 1.0 and the 2.0 worlds, because when I'm at the trap range, I hear some of these guys talk about right, the guys with their AR-15s and their race pistols that they shoot really fast with red dot sights and all this stuff. I think it's just really exciting to see 2.0, and obviously eventually the next phase of how gun culture will develop. It is bringing in new people into the sport. And Jon had written a really great article for Wired talking about how the AR-15 is very similar to building your own computer, and the modularity of each platform, and how you can pick and choose your hard drive and your graphics card and how much RAM and and then on the AR side of things, okay, what kind of bolt carrier group and trigger and barrel, and you can just geek out as much as you want. And this is in the big picture for me, is that this is just about having fun in a safe and responsible manner, and having productive conversations about gun culture, right? And that what we see in the news and in the media about how bad people use guns for bad things, that is not the full story, right? what we see about with gun violence is statistically a very small percentage of the way that guns are being used in America, and that the overwhelming majority, I'm talking, 98, 99% of gun-owning Americans are law-abiding citizens who are not causing any problems and not causing any crime. And so for me, not committing any crime. And so for me, this is about a pursuit of the truth. And as long as we know what the truth is, base your whatever opinion you want, but at least base your opinions and perspectives off of the facts. And I guess I think a little bit about how, let's just take an example. So I'm gay, and if you've never met a gay person, then you just have an incomplete picture of what the LGBT community is about, right? Then you can just live in your own head about what you think gay people are. And it's very similar with gun people, right? If you don't know any gun owners, if you've never shot a gun, it's just something that you are not basing your opinions and perspectives off of the truth, whether it's facts or whether it's an in-person experience. So that's what this is, that a big part of my involvement in gun culture is to shine this light on stories in the gun community that are not being told in traditional mass media.
Yeah, it's funny. I see some of that myself as a media person and a gun person. And actually, I'll go ahead and jump into another question because we should talk briefly about tragedy, because it strikes with depressing regularity right now. And I find that when there's a gun-related tragedy in the news, I become like a punching bag / lightning rod / defendant on trial for all gun people everywhere amongst my friends. And being a media person, I have a lot of friends who are not comfortable with guns or outright hostile. And so I'm often find that I kind of end up having to having to answer for a lot of these things, and a lot of it, you end up kind of going on the defense, and you're trying to defend something that's important to you. And for me, it's also, for myself, it's a heritage thing, because it's sort of the way that I was raised, and it's tied up with my ancestors and all this other kind of thing. But you end up kind of trying to defend on these different grounds, and what I want from gun people, like myself and from other gun people, is more of a okay, well, what are we going to do to help? What are the goals that gun people are going to work towards to minimize these kinds of things? Because there has to be something that can be done other than, there's a lot of proposals that come out that are not grounded in any basic knowledge of firearms, and so a lot of you have seen this. People that don't know, like, a gun is a machine, so people that don't know basics about how these things work will commonly produce proposals. Well, this would solve the problem, or this would solve the problem, or maybe we should have some sort of punitive tax on ammo or something like this. And so they're not plugged in enough, and you would never get away with that if you were trying to propose regulations around GMOs or any other kind of safety thing, if you didn't know basics about like planting and growing or genetics. But you can kind of do this in the gun world. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, to go back to it, I personally, I have my own opinions about what gun people can do, but I'd like to hear from Chris, just sort of what his take on this issue is, and like how gun people can not just be on the defensive, but can be proactive about addressing just the whole spectrum of gun violence, crime, suicide, mass shooting, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and at a very high level, I think the first step is if you're a gun owner, or if you don't own a gun but you support the Second Amendment, it's important that you speak up. And in the same way that someone can't look at me and know that I'm a gun owner or know that I'm gay, like, I have to be vocal about, hey, if somebody starts saying bad things about gay people in front of me, and like they don't know that I'm gay, like, I'm gonna say, hey, like, you're talking to a gay person. So in a very similar way of there's sort of gay shaming and gun shaming element that happens, right? So you're at the office and there's some sort of mass shooting event and someone starts saying, oh my gosh, right, we should just ban AR-15s and whatnot. And I mean, I've been in that position where it's like, okay, do you keep your mouth shut? And I understand, obviously, your relationships with your colleagues are something that, you want to maintain. But on the other hand, you remaining silent is in a way compliance and agreeing, with someone who you disagree with. So I think first and foremost, being vocal. Number two, knowing facts, and I am really trying to promote a thoughtful discussion and dialogue that we just do not see with our politicians, with policymakers, and to be honest, even just amongst us, just regular citizens. It's turned into this hyper partisanship, extreme, just extremism, where it's either ban guns or no regulation at all kind of discussion. And I mean, there's the nuances are interesting, and but at a very high level, it's too much of an emotionally driven conversation most of the time. And so, one of my focuses for gun violence is actually suicide prevention. And so for some of the numbers, in the United States, there's approximately 30,000 people who die because of at the hands of a gun. Now, 20,000 of those are suicides, and 10,000 are homicides. So, how are we looking at this gun violence problem where the majority of gun deaths, which are suicides, and we barely, actually, I don't think anybody I don't say no one, but this is not front and center in CNN and Fox News and all the other media outlets. And if you look at the 10,000 number for homicides, a majority of that is gang and criminal violence. And so if we're going to tackle the biggest problem, well, let the data dictate sort of where we should put our focus. And I think the suicide prevention piece, because it is so tightly connected to firearm safety, it's something I think everyone can agree on, that firearm safety is important. We want to protect people from hurting themselves. And I think there's more areas like this where, look, it's low-hanging fruit, potential for high impact, literally, move the needle and reduce the number of suicides in our country. And I think if we spend more time trying to work together towards common goals versus butting heads all the time. I mean, of course, there will be times where it's just going to happen, You're going to butt heads, but I think our country is in a place where we're not trying to work together as much as we should.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I'm far to the left of Barack Obama, but I'm also a gun person. And, a lot of my my colleagues and friends on the left, I'm always trying to get them to be like, let's not demonize, let's not stereotype, let's not be prejudiced, let's not demonize, because there are a lot of gun owners who are a lot more moderate than you think, and who are interested in solutions. And whenever all gun owners get kind of lumped together with the crazies, or with mass shooters or whatever, it contributes to this polarization that is totally counterproductive. And not that I want to say, oh, gun owners are victims or this kind of thing, because that's a kind of rhetoric that's also not helpful when gun owners try to paint themselves as victims of some kind of persecution thing. Mm-hmm. But if everybody could dial back down, that would be great. But it's so hard to think about doing that. And we can come back to this. This is a super loaded and super touchy topic, but we can definitely come back to it later or in the Q&A session. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask about going from being a tech nerd to being a gun nerd, because this is a kind of a transition that I made, and I was super fascinated. I covered CES back when it was Comdex, and it was very much elastic waistbands and giant PDAs, and it was like nerd central, man. And I came out of the PC enthusiast scene, and we overclocked, and we did graphics card benchmarks in frames per second, and we had operating system wars, and there was a whole online, kind of geek culture. And CES has totally flushed all that out. Now it's like celebrities, and it's of course this is the rise of the post-PC era and the smartphone and stuff like this. There are car people at CES and Verizon execs, but anyway, it was this kind of pristine, sort of nerd paradise, back in the day. And when I jumped into gun culture, my first experience was covering SHOT Show, and this is where I met Chris. This was right after Newtown, and I was aware of the black rifle phenomenon, but was not really that into it. But I kind of was aware enough to know that there was a gadget component. So I got the Wired guys to approve a pitch, and I went to SHOT as part of the second media crew, and I agreed to do some blogging for the Firearm blog as well, and that got me credentials, which SHOT wasn't really handing out credentials to anybody that was not gun press.
The SHOT Show is the largest gun convention in Las Vegas every year.
It's the CES of guns. Mm-hmm. So I was able to get in and go and do a bunch of interviews, and I was so struck. I was like, this is like going back in time 12 years. I mean, these people are so nerdily into what they're into, and there's just, they don't even really care about the press. I was like the last person anybody really was just interested in talking to. And then when you go on forums, there's operating system wars in AR-15 world, the piston versus direct impingement, and they call it an operating system. There's frames per second feet per second benchmarks, FPS instead of frames per second, for a graphics card. And so you have benchmark bake-offs and operating system wars, and you have people in different camps, and there's religious
caliber
controversies. It's just as vicious as Mac versus PC of yesteryear. And so many similarities, and I end up feeling like pretty well at home, But I wanted to get Chris's take on that, because I know that you've made the jump as well.
Yeah, it's been exciting to go from a place like Google, where all of us are so passionate about technology and about making things better in our world, and that passion that you have here at a place like Google, which really activates you, right? You have just tremendous resources here at your disposal to do some really, really great things in the world. And to go, I think one of my biggest concerns about leaving Google were, right, there's just so many intelligent and driven, smart, capable people, right? Would I find that, in the firearms world? I mean, I literally didn't know a single person in the firearms industry, leaving Google, and it was just this exciting adventure of leaving kind of the creature comforts of 3 square meals a day, and delicious Google cafes, and the shuttles, and just all a recurring paycheck, just simple securities like that. And thankfully, I've been pleasantly surprised with the types of people that I've met in the shooting community, on the industry side of things, that very intelligent, very driven, and very smart people that are also just very passionate about the Second Amendment. And for me, when I shot recreationally, that's all it was, right? For me, shooting was not about the Second Amendment. I didn't care about the politics or the policy. It was just, before Top Shot, I was like, I just go to the range to have fun. It was just kind of a exciting stress relief activity. But now that I've been paying attention to the politics and the policy discussions, and realizing that the Second Amendment is our right to defend ourselves, and it's about personal responsibility, and not saying that, hey, if I'm in trouble, that I'm just going to call 911 and the police will save me. it's about being responsible for your own safety, for your family's safety, for the safety of the ones that you love. And you know, the tyrannical government piece is, I think, a very interesting kind of conversation piece, right? You hear gun people say, all right, the Second Amendment is our way of protecting the people from tyranny. And I don't know about you, but at least like before I, was studying the Second Amendment a little bit more, I hear the word tyranny, I just think like 17th century England with, kings and, knights in armor and, the tyrannical king, that's laying waste to, his subjects. And, tyranny in today's time, tyranny is all about the unfair application or abuse of power on a specific group of people. And so, for example, in the 60s and the 50s, 60s, 70s, when the KKK was really, kind of doing well, there were sheriffs who were, the grand master of the KKK. And if a black person, right, needed the help of the sheriff, probably forget about it. And so the fact that a government entity like a sheriff's department or police department would not protect an African American, there's some examples of some individual police officers not protecting LGBT gay pride parades. This happened in Salt Lake City. That was just an individual, but right, you could swap that out for a police chief or a deputy sheriff or something like that. And that is the modern, for me, the modern version of tyranny. That's why we need to have a way to protect ourselves when the government won't be there to protect us.
Yeah, I totally hear that, and I think if there are ever robot overlords, I'm either going to run and hide or I'm going to become a collaborator. So don't come to me if that happens and be like, John's a gun person, he's going to help me out with no, man, I'm going to sell you out to the robot overlord. So I'm going to put this on YouTube so that people know, man. I'm warning you in advance. Anyway, to kind of piggyback on that, you definitely you overlap multiple communities. Asian community, tech community, gun community, gay community, and the gun community and the gay community have historically, been at odds. And you're now an NRA commentator, and these guys had Sarah Palin. Mm-hmm. at the last, I almost had to spit, but at the most recent NRA convention, and so I know that you get a lot from you probably face some backlash from both sides.
Sure.
And I love to hear any kind of stories or anecdotes, and I also know that gay men can really snark it up, and so you probably have some great stories there too, of deadly snark or or redneck bigotry or whatever kind of.
Yeah, I think there's a false narrative that is being told in the media. So you mentioned historically that the gay community and the gun community are at odds, and I think that's completely false. But if all you watch is the media, then sure, that is the narrative that you continue to hear. And so for the past 2 years since leaving Google, I've traveled all across the country to parts of states and parts of states that I never imagined myself being in. And it's been wonderful, and I've met so many gun people who are just they are ecstatic when they meet me and they know that I'm gay, and I can't tell you the number of times that I hear someone say, I'm so glad that you're representing the firearms community, because there are more people, like us that really welcome anybody that's interested in learning how to shoot. Come out and join us. And this is it's a perception problem that I think the gun community that I'm trying to counter. Because all in all, sure, I've met a few. I actually haven't met anybody who's to my face said oh, you're gay and talk to. It's all just internet troll nonsense, which, these days, I mean, look, I managed a product forum here at Google for a year and a half, and like that was my job, is like manage the trolls. Occasionally I would feed them, mostly try and starve them, but it just comes with the territory, right, to deal with criticism. And I think the other kind of thought to answer your question about just sort of my experiences, ultimately, for me, this is about encouraging each of us to live our own truth and to be not ashamed of who we are and what we believe in. And there's always going to be people who disagree with you, right? That's if you build an argument starting with that base, right? Just knowing that there's people who are going to disagree with you on just all of everything. And I used to treat life to a certain extent like a popularity contest, right? Like high school and junior high, like, yeah, I want to be friends with everybody. And to a large extent, I mean, that is still very much a strong goal and a strong drive for me, is to be nice to people and to find ways for us to get along. But on the other hand, like, I'm not willing and I'm not going to compromise who I am and what I believe in for the sake of being, I'll be civil, but I'm not going to, like, obviously go out of my way to, pretend like I like them if they, are not a good person. No. So living our own truth is a real big focus for me, and encouraging that in others.
So we're kind of running long on time, and I want to. This is a great sort of a vein of discussion, but I want to break out of it because we do have the clip.
Oh,
and,
right.
And we can't forget about the clip. And so I want to set up the clip because, as a gun culture 1.0 person, you learned that shooting is about muscle memory, and it's about talent and all this other kind of stuff. And Chris talks a lot in his book about visualization and stress management. And what is this? What kind of how do you, like, I would never think that this is important for a marksman, visualization and stress management. But these were kind of the keys to his sort of come from nowhere kind of success. And I want to ask him a question about that, because I told him, I said, I feel like your book should have been called The 4-Hour Marksman, because it comes from this kind of hacker,
Tim Ferriss,
but not quite, I mean, training is still important, but I want to get a look at Chris in action doing his visualization or the fruit of that.
Great, yeah, we're gonna set up the projector here, and so while we're waiting for the projector to fire up, I'll do a little bit of an intro here to what we're going to see here. So this was one of the most thrilling and harrowing elimination challenges for me, where I was going up against William Bethards, who is a Marine Corps rifleman, and he trains FBI special agents in Quantico, and so every single FBI special agent, over the past, 10 years or something, like, has gone through his tutelage. So let me just go ahead and play. It's a 5-minute clip, and enjoy.
Stress management, ladies and gentlemen. I almost wet my pants watching it, and I know how it ends. So I can't imagine. And you can see the marksman just like fumbling with it.
So yeah, to kind of talk a little bit about what was going on, and sort of what I talk about in the book is stress management and emotional management. So with that 1860 Henry rifle that I was shooting, there was a whole practice session that happened, that was aired before the actual event, and so I knew that rifle shot high. So for a lot of guns that are sight in, right, you put your front sight on a target, you're going to hit the target. Well, in this case, the point of impact was higher above the target, and so basically what that means is I needed to aim low to hit my target. Now, when that elimination challenge first started off, I was missing high, and just all that stress that was building up. There's a phrase called the amygdala hijack, where the emotional part of your brain just like literally takes over any cognitive, rational thinking abilities. And so, right, in my mind, like, I know that this gun shoots high. I need to aim lower. But like a dumb caveman, I just kept on doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And it was really funny that usually when Colby, who's the host who you saw there, when he's narrating during these challenges, you just want to like just be quiet, you know. Just like I need to hear you, you know, narrating, you know, all my mistakes, and let me focus on shooting. But in this specific challenge, when you heard him say Chris is falling behind or Chris better pick up the pace, I heard that because he was literally about 12 feet behind me. But I heard that, and that snapped me out of it. And I had this moment where I just said, okay, I need to just recenter. And for me, a big part of stress management is pulling on other experiences where I've had to you know, deal with stress. And so at Google, dealing with angry customers, that was a big part of my job. Customers would call in or email, right? My Gmail's not working, Google Calendar's not showing certain events or whatever. And remaining calm when a customer is just screaming and yelling at you because they're, you know, there's all sorts of problems. It's a hard skill to focus, to build, because, right, the customer's angry, but you need to stay calm and just focus on the task at hand. So when I was stressed out in that elimination challenge, I definitely was pulling on that Google experience, and so again, that sort of like cross-disciplinary approach to problem solving and project management definitely, you know, came forward in helping me win that elimination challenge.
We're almost done here, and I want to throw out one last quick question, and then
we'll take some questions.
We'll take some questions from the audience.
Yeah.
So, just a very quick question. So, the zombie apocalypse, man. What are the 3 guns that you're going to have for the zombie apocalypse? You know I had to ask it.
Yeah, I mean, especially with, you know, the Ebola and
exactly.
the enterovirus D68. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on these days. So 3 guns. You know, if I'm not a prepper and I'm not like a survivalist, but being a native Californian, having an earthquake kit is just like, that's like standard. And now that I'm in the gun world, you know, adding guns to, so, you know, your earthquake kit basically just doubles as like, you know, doomsday, you know, kind of disaster kit. And so, sort of there's a holy trinity, if you will, of, you know, pistol, shotgun, and a rifle, but I really would just say there's really not much of a discussion about the rifle. It should be an AR-15. For the rifle, I'm a 12 gauge, you know, shotgun. I would say, I mean, this huge, you know, controversy around, right? What is the right shotgun for a survival situation? I mean, you could go, I would just say pump Remington 870 or Mossberg 500. They're reliable. You've got capacity in it. And then with the pistol, shoot, just well, I'd say revolver's a really good choice, but I'm a Glock guy, so I'd have my Glock 34.
Cool. So, do you guys have questions? We can take some questions from the audience. I guess I should grab a mic here.
That we had a serious suicide problem, and the host was just all about anti-guns. And he saw it as an opportunity to push his anti-gun stance, when the person who was recognizing this problem of suicide was like, listen, in Oregon it's really bad. It's actually, of all suicides, or of all gun deaths, I think about 80-85% are suicides. Is something that maybe we can address. How do we get that out there more? How do we make that part of the conversation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think what I want to encourage is that each of us as individuals has a lot of power over dictating or directing the conversation that happens in our local communities, and then county-wide, statewide, and nationwide. And, you know, especially with the web, right, a single voice, a single story can have a tremendous resonating impact. And so my answer is we need to talk about this in any appropriate forum where we come in with the knowledge and the facts and the stories, because arguments can't just be dry, factual, logical arguments. There has to be an emotional connection and a grounding, right? Because that is right, this combination of logic and emotion, for me, I think that is finding that sweet spot for how to convey a compelling argument. And I think it's suicide prevention is it's not just about guns. I would add the word just, because yes, I mean, guns are a part of, like, I don't want to make it seem like extreme, like it's just a mental health issue. Right? The guns are part of the problem, but one thing that I look back at my experience here at Google, and I worked with a lot of engineers as a part of my role, where it's like, right, we hear customer problems, and we're relaying information to engineers who are trying to figure out the root cause of a problem. And that root cause analysis and approach is always just like it's like stayed with me. Because the customer may say something like, I'm seeing something in Gmail where I click on a button and like my messages disappear, whatever. We relay that information, onto the engineers, and right, like the engineering team's looking into this, and right, the problem may not even lie with Gmail. It may be related to the Google account framework and causing some sort of problem. So right, you have all of these potential red herrings out there. I see a Gmail problem. I see a suicide problem. Therefore, it must be a gun problem. When in actuality, right, the suicide problem has its own root causes, right? The gun is not causing people to kill themselves, right? There's something else and deeper with that particular topic. And so, again, the more conversations that we can have that are driven by facts, but also by anecdotes and narratives, I think is an effective approach. And this is a long, hard slog, right? There's not going to be any immediate solution that we're going to see. This is going to take decades, and this is the kind of commitment that I have to this kind of issue, and I know there's lots of other people there that are also committed to reducing gun violence and preventing suicides.
Back when you were here and going through Top Shot and doing tech talks and stuff, which was great, it was super exciting. I remember at one point you shared some like tricks sheet, and it was kind of like, I don't want to say it was like life goals, but it was like something like that. And I remember like looking at that, and just for one, I was kind of like, oh my god, this guy like shared what his like goals for life are. This is amazing, right? Because I was like, this seems private and all that, but it was really inspiring. And I seem to vaguely remember there was some stuff in there about like, well, maybe one day I want to go into politics.
Sure.
And I don't want to try and hold you to something from several years ago, like I was in a different time or anything. But I mean, do you still think maybe one day you'll pursue that route? Because I know I'd go for it.
Sure. Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean that's definitely still in the cards for me. But it's funny that you mentioned the personal development plan, or otherwise known as a PDP. That's actually in chapter 1 of the book, which is talking about why learn to shoot, and right, how does the specific marksmanship skill sets and related skills, trigger control, sight alignment, sight picture, these are marksmanship skills, but they also feed into hard work, discipline, mind, body, soul control, and mindfulness. And how do you effectively leverage your whole skill set into a career path? And so in the book, I talk about how marksmanship for me, I mean, unexpectedly, this wasn't like something that I'm like, hey, I'm working at Google, like I'm going to study, guns and like go do a career in guns. But it's how to really, again, just tie this all together and be happy, right? And be fulfilled in your career path, and know that the work that you're doing today is building to your own personal, and professional goals. And having a plan around that. So quick background, part of my role at Google was also leadership training and also management training. So if you've taken True Colors, which is like a whittled down version of Myers-Briggs, so I was a True Colors facilitator, and love talk. And I was a career coach for my team, and so it's. I think the main point, though, of especially related to your question, is knowing what you want to get out of life, right? And being very specific as you can, and sharing that with people. And look, I'll tell you, like, so I actually have a Google short link to my PDP in the book, and I may not hit all my goals, right, that I have out there, but there's some like really lofty stuff out there. And obviously at a place like Google, I mean, right, we dream big for ourselves, for the company, for the potential that Google products have to do good in the world. And I think it's just very natural for us to want the same, right? We want to optimize and maximize our own personal happiness. So thanks for bringing up the question, because yeah, it's actually related to the book.
So we're out of time, but Chris, did you have any kind of final thoughts that you want to share briefly?
So I think just to really bring home the point of living your own truth, that I think is just so important. And this whole gun stuff and all the gay stuff with same-sex marriage and all these assault weapons and 30-round magazine controversies. These are hard conversations to have with a lot of people, and we can't shy away from the things that we believe in. And again, just live your own truth, and whatever that truth is, make sure people know. And for me, I mean, that's just been, I think, a huge key to my own personal happiness, and I hope it is for other people as well.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you guys for coming out.
Thanks, everybody.